I realized I can't, I'm having a real hard time writing about this, not because I don't have the words, but because it hurts. And I can't tell you how wild this feeling I'm having right now is, only because I assumed that I had gotten past all that, that I'd gotten past the year that I got cancer and my mom died of cancer. And I just was wondering your thoughts on this quality of grief or trauma. What is this? How is this still stuck in me? And does it ever go away? And I just would love to know your thinking on this.
Well, I'm sensing what you say. I need it before I leap in with all the, wise presentiments and whatever that might even be wrong. When you say it hurts, how does it hurt? What's the hurt?
It's not the worst hurt, but it's, it sounds, I'm really trying to avoid tearing up on podcasts right now because I think it's as cheesy as you can be. But I'm sitting here writing. All of a sudden I'm crying as I'm writing. Then I'm like, why am I what is this? And so it's a kind of sweet hurt. It's sweet, but it hurts. It's, and maybe part of the reason it's sweet right now is just because it's like an old friend or something that I forgot about, that suddenly it's like, oh, hi, here I am, just hanging out right in your heart, right under the surface of everything, just sort of hanging out here. And I've been hanging out here for a while, since that year. So I guess it's a kind of sweet pain. And if that makes sense.
Yeah. So your pains. So there's a few things to say. First of all, going back to your writing, there are the days it comes out and you go, oh, I wrote something. And then days a little bit later that you look at it and say, this is shit.
Yes.
Why did I think this was? And it's like you were drunk or stoned and you wrote this brilliant, long poem. And the next morning you were looking at it and say, this is drivel. I thought it was brilliant. Yeah. So do you know what that makes you?
What?
A writer.
All right. Good news.
You've arrived. So there's that, just to keep that in mind. And then to port that over to this next question about the grief that you carry, do you know what that makes you?
What?
It makes you a human.
Right.
This is, sorry to say, you took human incarnation, Duncan.
Yeah.
In the weird form that you did, we all done this. And you get praise and blame and gain and loss and pleasure and pain and birth and death.
Yes.
And all of those things. And so, that brilliant book about trauma by our friend Bessel van der Kolk, New York Times bestseller for years now, is called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
And what you're experiencing as you write about it is you're opening that gateway in your psyche, in your mind and heart. And then that which is held in your body, the grief for your mom and her death, the grief and pain and terror that came initially probably for cancer and how
Yes.
you managed it, all that's still there. And I remember somebody describing therapy as helping people shift from the same damn thing over and over to one damn thing after another, right?
That's brilliant.
So that there's a necessary repetition in our life. But when you grieve honorably, which means you let yourself feel it and let yourself go through all the parts of grief, which include your tears.
Yeah.
And we all carry a portion of the ocean of tears that's there for humanity and there in the universe.
Right.
When you let yourself grieve in the ways that grief does, then it's still there. It doesn't take you over so much, but it can be triggered because it's still held in your body, right? As Bessel would say, it's still held in the heart for this incarnation at least. And so any kind of Dharma expectations that, okay, now I've handled it. Anybody who said they've handled anything is, gotta roll up the window shades and look out because it's coming again at some point. It just doesn't work that way. What we do handle is our capacity for love and our capacity to be present and say, yeah, this too is part of the game. So you went through a really tough year and now you re-experience it some. And people know about grief. When someone you love dies or there's the end of a relationship or marriage or something, where we've been so deeply connected and then there's this huge loss. Grief initially comes in waves. You have these huge waves of outpourings of all its parts of anger and, blame or why did this happen or confusion and tears and so forth. And then the waves subside. Grief doesn't actually go away. What it does is there becomes space between it. So you're grieving horribly and then you have to go to the market and you have to figure out, well, am I going to get, Tide or Eco Soap for on that in front of that counter, and you're trying to figure out because they're all trying to get you to buy these 40 things with their colors, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I forgot to grieve because it went away for a little bit, and I'm back being a regular person trying to figure out which laundry soap to buy, and then a new wave of grief will hit. So you start to learn actually when you pay attention to grief. That it's both honorable to let it be experienced and also to let it ebb and flow, that it's what it does. And then for you, I'm not sorry about this. You talk about the tears, which is, damn, I wish the world leaders, when they get on the, television and talk about, well, we're going to invade this or we're going to do that, I wish they were weeping when they said it.
Well, maybe this is why Biden has started wearing sunglasses. Maybe he's
I would hope so. That it because that level of leadership also involves, if you're honorable about it, knowing that the decisions you make, even if the best you can do, involve a lot of suffering for a lot of people.
I'm glad you said that because this brings me to something I wanted to bring up with you. That I just did this podcast with this genius Lex Friedman who just got back from the Ukraine, where he was interviewing people for a month in the Ukraine. I saw him, he came to the door and was like, well, I'd never seen dead bodies before this. And we talked about it. And he brought up something that seems paradoxical in that situation, which is that these are people who have had their homes destroyed. These are people who have seen so much death, who have lost loved ones. And he said the spirit there is so sweet, that everyone's helping, that people are really unified and very sweet. But then he talked about the soldiers. He talked about, the sort of the state of consciousness one has to go into to launch a missile into a group of people, and how many of these people are, if I'm still upset, if I'm still grieving because I lost my mom to cancer in 2013, these are people who have lost their children 3 days ago. And I realized in that moment I was scrambling for some kind of pithy Buddhist thing to say. And all I thought about was my kids. And I thought about if something happened to my kids, if my kids had been murdered, that I would not be able to not, I don't, I guess it's just like, just even speculating it, I started questioning my own exploration in the Dharma and my own meditation practice and all this stuff Ram Dass and you and Trudy and everyone teaches. Like in that moment, somehow just being around someone who'd just gotten back, I thought all I would feel was hate and all I would want to do was kill people who'd hurt my kids. And I feel like I just ruined everything that I, in that moment where, you know, if I was cornfielding, I would have had something real to say, but I had nothing other than, my God, I get it.
I'm taking a breath because it asks for some space around it. And the fact that you were weeping, you know, just because you couldn't write your book, nevertheless, the fact that the fact that your tears were coming in part because of what you did suffer through cancer and your mom's death and so forth. We grieve because we care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't grieve. So underneath grief is the fact that we actually are connected and love. And that's part of, you know, what you were experiencing when Lex came back, because it was the shared grief. It's not your grief, it's the grief that we carry as humanity. And it's happening right now, not just in Ukraine, but in Myanmar or in, you know, South Sudan or
Yes.
in places all around the world, including in our own towns and cities and so forth. And then you say, well, what if I were to face the worst thing I can imagine, which is the death of one of my children? That's kind of, for people, that's like the, you know, even I, you know, would be willing to die or be, you know, hurt or tortured, but spare my children.
Yes.
Right? So now you're going to the right heart of human incarnation. How can we love when the possibility of this enormous pain is there?
Yes.
And war is not new, by the way.
Right.
We've been doing this for a very long time. And so this is part of our collective heart. And then you put on top of it some kind of idea, forgive me for saying it, some kind of spiritual ideal that,
Yeah.
okay, if it were me in Ukraine, Jack Kornfield or Ram Dass or, you know, some saint or something like that,
Yeah.
then they'd all say, oh yeah, you know, it comes and it goes, and who I am is so much bigger than all that, and my children were killed in a missile, and it's, you know, it's just how it goes. That's nonsense. It's an ideal, you know,
Right.
and we need ideals in some way to kind of look to see, can we be more wise or gracious or compassionate with all the suffering in the world and all the love that's in the world. But any kind of measurement, you can't measure grief. You can't compare it. You also can't even really prepare for it. You say, okay, I'll meditate, and then when my, you know, something disastrous happens to my children, I'll be chill. Not me.
Right.
Not me. I don't expect that.
Right.
I do everything I can. If my daughter was in the farthest part of the world and said, Daddy, and she's like 37, right? I really need you. I would go. I would not hesitate at all.
Right.
She was going through a hard time when she was working. She was doing an internship in Cambodia for the War Crimes Tribunal. And then some stuff happened. This was a decade ago or so when she was, you know, starting to study law. And I got this message and I said, I'm on a plane tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So you're just talking about the human heart and the fact that we do care and we're interwoven and that loss is painful.
Yes.
And there's no, and that means that we also have to grieve.